So good morning. This talk is called "The Precepts Are Sacred." Okay. When we first hear about the precepts, there's some reluctance in all of us about them because they do seem a little bit like rules which are meant to limit our activities. But I think this is a mistake. Instead, precepts can be thought of as a means of helping us by eliminating our extraneous activity or any activity that could be harmful to us. Instead of handling the precepts with worry, it would help us much more to embrace them with a positive attitude. From there, we can understand why we need them, and we know better how to use them for the most part in a more helpful way. Even when we forget about the precepts, they're always at work they're always like a work in progress inside of us. We wonder if we should eliminate everything in our lives that's written in the precepts, because then we might live a very clean life. However, that's kind of impossible. And it's also misleading, because a clean life is not the intent of practice, but instead a life which is free from activity which can be harmful to us or to others. So if we free ourselves from harmful activity, we will help ourselves from that and be able to help others as well. I think Americans are so afraid of rules that even something like the precepts seems to be too close to them, and we'd prefer to avoid them at first, so we think. But we could even consider the precepts as a means to be a support to us when we get in over our heads in water, deep water, about some of the characteristics we meet in our study from ourselves or even from other people. But when we study the precepts, it will even be helpful if we become too reluctant to look at ourselves, because then in the midst of such a trying time, we feel like we have a companion in the precepts, and we can feel free to ask the question, what does this mean after all? For example, what does the precept "do not kill" mean? Does this precept only mean that violent actions are bad? Or does it mean that it means that taking the life of something or someone or destroying something is forbidden? Or does this precept mean not to be violent at all with ourselves or with other or even with our things? There are many layers to consider when studying the precepts, including others and ourselves and all of our things surrounding us. Consider the precept "do not slander," for example. Does this mean only not to talk bad about others? Or does it also mean not even to think about others in a bad way or even with a violent mind? Or could it just mean not to say or think or speak badly about others at any time, even when provoked, even when we feel we have right on our side? And how about the precept "do not praise oneself"? Does that mean not to boast about oneself, or does it mean more than that? For example, like, do not get lost in oneself. Do not put oneself to the front unless it's really necessary. In other words, when we study the precepts, we have many levels to consider in the study. For example, in the prohibitions, are they necessary? Or also, does that mean not to get lost in thought with them? Or does it mean not to get lost in them at all? Even trying to do them doesn't mean not to get lost in them. We set the precepts and consider the many variations about them, but also we have to examine ourselves very thoroughly in order to do that. And finally, the most difficult thing to do is to examine ourselves without prejudice, to do it properly. Finally, the precepts are a means to help us eliminate the debris we've accumulated, and we carry it without knowing it, like a little boat with too many anchors and stuff inside. If we can stay with the study of the precepts without losing our intentions, then we can do many good things in the study of ourselves, and we become aware as we lighten our load that the first 3 precepts are really very important. For example, the first one tells us, do no evil. And we could change that word evil to do no harm. That's very difficult to do, because after we eliminate the big weights, like do not kill, do not profane, etc., then it means we have to study the more subtle ways that it means we have to study. And in the more subtle ways, we harm ourselves and others as if it was a gross way. When we're able to do that, when we are able to do that, then we can work on as well the second precept, because then it becomes important. To do good. This is also difficult because we're usually unaware of how we are remiss in taking care of others and ourselves in a healthy way. But as we begin to do practice helping others, then we see clearly what we are not doing that we should be doing. And when we understand that, then we're ready to take on the most difficult precept of all, to live for the benefit of other beings. As we begin to work on this one little by little, we start to look at the other 16 precepts for help and come to understand that they teach us how to do the first 4 precepts properly. Understanding this is important because we have come to understand through the study of the precepts that we are part of the long interconnectedness of all beings, and we are also connected to the ancestors of our practice in a very intimate way because of the precepts. We could also come to understand that this is a sacred duty we take on and a deep responsibility, because we are part of this long line of people, known and unknown. And our responsibility is to keep at least ourselves as clear as possible so that we don't muddy the waters. And we understand also that the precepts, even though they are kind of rules, do not limit us, but provide a doorway into freedom if we do them with the right attitude. Because we are Zen students and our major way of learning is to do meditation, we are also connected to our ancestors in a very intimate way. But we have teachers to guide us in our practice so that we search with the right intent as we go into our own garden of understanding within and find knowledge that we need for ourselves. Our teachers guide and trust that we will not get lost in our search. So our way, the Zen way, is not to receive secret knowledge from a teacher, but to do the work for ourselves and find that we can't depend on anyone except ourselves in this study. And if we do this with that understanding, we will find the right understanding and the right knowledge. So precepts are a wonderful way to help us to go into the depths of our unconscious mind and find the knowledge that we need. Since we do have it all present, it's up to us to choose and pick what is helpful and leave out greed, envy, or delusion in the process of study. Think of the precepts like the precious stone, which is a story in the Lotus Sutra. When a son begins a journey on his own, the father sews a precious jewel or stone into his clothing. And he wonders, but he forgets about the jewel and feels himself to be very poor. And so he has a very hard time until he meets his father again. And his father reminds him that he has always been very rich with this stone, even when he didn't know it. You could say this stone is like the precious precepts we integrate into ourselves as we practice, and the very presence of them makes our life rich within ourselves and rich in our ability to find our way home to peace. Thank you.
Okay, let's move this and Mark get the picture now too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions? No questions about the precepts? Well, that's fine. That means you understand well what your study is.